This way, the issue could be tackled more effectively. That's exactly what you said.
Well, we'll just keep talking about it. But people are, here in Quebec, where they've outlawed plastic bags in grocery stores now.
It started now.
You have to buy more expensive bags. So people are really beginning to get used to bringing their bags back. And yeah, it's good timing. In response to Mark's very story on the Avro Arrow, Peter Ashcroft in England questioned,
was this an example of common sense being overruled by political expediency?
And of course, that's the big question, Peter. As Mark referred to, there have been several big conspiracy theories, but nobody's really had the answer. But as Terry pointed out, Dan Aykroyd did do a movie, so that should be available somewhere in cyberspace. Dan Aykroyd and the Avro Arrow. And in response to another of Mark's stories titled Vast Boreal Forest in Alberta Threatened by Climate Change, David writes,
another wild assertion based on models and not observed reality. Plants feast on CO2. The planet has been greening as CO2 in the air increases. Desert is retreating and plants grow faster and hardier in a CO2-enriched condition.
Okay.
That's
and
David, putting it right there. David, yeah.
We'll leave it there.
No, that's as far as he went.
I know.
He makes his point, though.
Yes, and he has a great point, I'm sure. I don't really know enough about the science of climate change, I must admit.
Science, I had to take geology. Because that was the only one I could really remember. Because you can just memorize geology.
Can you?
Yeah, you can. You have no choice. You have to pass your science course.
Took geography.
Or geography, but that's.
I'm still fascinated with the tectonic plates.
Okay, well, there's nothing. Well, see, I'm in over my head here.
That's what I said.
Can we talk baseball, please?
No, we're going to go to high heels because in response to my blog post last week on the declining sales of high heels, Peter Ashcroft again asked.
Okay, to what extent, now I want to know, I've always wondered this myself, writes Peter, to what extent do high heels put additional strain on a lady's ankles? And I think of Ginger Rogers, who did everything that Fred Astaire did backwards and in heels.
Yes,
but do they? Yes. How do women walk on those things?
Well, some of them, I mean, you know, Manolo Blahnik apparently is something to definitely put your foot into, and you can strut everywhere. That's a beautifully crafted shoe. But, you know, it depends, I guess, on the woman. I think it's not so much the ankles, it's the back and the lower back and the knees that can really suffer. And I guess for some people, the ankles, it depends on if you have weak ankles. But I can tell you the balls of your feet where, you know, all the weight is, that can really take... they can take a beating if you've spent a day.
Well, you're walking around like a rabbit or something.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you know, now I call them restaurant shoes. I go there, I sit down, and I leave. But it was interesting, this decline in sales. I hadn't heard about that. But women and younger women, by and large, are buying more sneaker-like shoes, flat shoes. And Theresa May, the Prime Minister of Britain, is photographed in her flats and looking very chic. But this is definitely, you know, things are changing. Although there are many women, diehard women who will not exit the house without their high heels on.
No, but here's the deal, Carm. I mean, look, you got women wearing heels and you got men wearing ties. Where does that start? Where does all that start?
Is there a decline in tie sales, I wonder?
No, I'm sure there was. I mean, when Jack Kennedy didn't wear his hat at his inaugural in 1960, hat sales plummeted.
Is that so? So that was the beginning of the end?
It was the beginning of the end for hats, was Jack Kennedy not wearing his hat at the inaugural.
Although fedoras are making a bit of a comeback.
It's
funny how quickly these things can change.
It's all in the marketing, kid, all in the packaging, like we talked about before.
Maybe ties will be going too.
Well, I got a hat for my birthday last year.
What kind?
A straw hat. I mean, not a straw. I mean, it's sort of straw. It's straw-y hat.
And I bet it's a fedora.
It's a fedora.
Must look very chic.
Do I ever look good in a fedora?
I bet you do.
It's incredible.
What do you think, Zabir?
But it's a matter of fashion, you know. And I think it's a matter of fashion. But I think all the time you don't have to sacrifice your health to get being, a stylish person or a stylish woman.
Well, apparently high heels started with men in the Middle Ages or in Europe.
Really?
Yeah, France and Italy. France for sure.
Okay.
See, because I went to boarding school, okay, so we had to wear a jacket and tie every single day of our lives.
Well, most girls who went to boarding school had to wear pretty
tunics.
plain,
They wore tunics.
simple, flat shoes as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so
You had to wear a tie every day of
every
yes,
day,
okay.
man. A suit and tie, and on Sundays we had to wear a suit, to go to lunch.
Great training.
No, it's not.
Okay, we're going to go to a little musical break.
Okay.
Doesn't that sound like Oscar once again?
It does.
Okay, well, in news you can certainly use, the Chinese space station is now descending through the Earth's atmosphere. According to the European Space Agency's Space Debris Office, and yes, they have one, they're predicting that the Tiangong-1 will re-enter Earth's atmosphere between March 31st and April 2nd. Did you know anything about this?
No.
Fascinating.
That's starting tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it will occur somewhere between 43 degrees north latitude and 43 degrees south. So that's just a small area of southern Ontario, leaving the rest of Canada out of range. Andrew Fazekas says our chances of being hit with any debris are about 1 in a trillion. And just to put that in perspective, getting hit by lightning is about 1 in a million. So it's extremely remote. But this event has put the reality of space debris in the spotlight. Here's some of what science writer and night sky guy Andrew Fazekas said about this growing challenge earlier this week on CBC Radio.
We've done the number crunching on this. The aerospace industry experts have been looking at the trajectory this week of it and looking how it's coming down, the gravitational pull of the Earth, how it's pulling it down into the atmosphere, the drag of the atmosphere, the friction of it. There is precedent. I mean, it's not something that we can just put it away in our thoughts because we just don't know exactly where and when this thing is coming down. And that's because we just don't know enough about how the atmosphere is going to play into this. We don't have enough physics and global monitoring of the atmosphere of the Earth to understand exactly how a tumbling multi-ton object will behave when it enters the atmosphere. And that's what's leaving, people scratching their heads going, well, where exactly can we expect this thing to fall? I mean, our understanding of the physics, the dynamics and mechanics of the atmosphere of Earth are really in its infancy. So we lack that predictability, and this lack of predictability influences our ability to predict what happens to these objects, these large, massive objects that are being dragged into the atmosphere. And that's what's happening with this Chinese station. It's the gravity of the Earth is slowly pulling it down. It's about 200 kilometers above our heads now, and at this point, it's interacting with the very outermost part of Earth's atmosphere. So the atmosphere is becoming thicker around the station, so it's dragging it. It's starting to pull it down even further. It's slowing it down. And in the next couple of days, it'll be about 70 kilometers above our planet. At that point is when it starts tumbling uncontrollably and starting to burn up. Most likely, it'll all burn up. There'll be no fragments that'll make it to the ground, but there's no guarantee to that. Any observer in the right place at the right time could see, fragments on fire, basically, something burning up at a very high altitude. Even if it happens during daytime, it would be possible to see. We need to have a plan B in place for all these satellites and other heavy equipment that's up in space that'll eventually meet its end of life. And I'm already thinking about the International Space Station, which is the size of a football field. And eventually it'll be retired. And how will it be deorbited properly? That's a big question. There's a lot of ideas floating around there, like maybe, push these satellites down to a low Earth orbit below every functioning satellite and then maybe blow them up into little small fragments and then allow those little fragments to burn up. But, that's just one idea. Nobody's actually really actively looking at a plan B. And, I think, and what I'm hearing from experts really really regarding this is that they're thinking perhaps this Chinese space station incident is going to be a motivation for government agencies worldwide to really provide the funding to researchers to get a grasp on the science of reentries. That's the starting point, is because this problem is not going to go away. It's going to repeat itself, and the risks are going to continue to go up as well, especially as we have a growing number of orbiting objects around the Earth.
Well, that was Andrew Fazekas, a.k.a. the Night Sky Guy, a Montreal-based science writer, and that was on Thursday morning, March 29th. So, it's approaching quickly, and you didn't know anything about this, eh?
No.
Well, Tiangong was China's first space station, about the size of a school bus. It was launched in 2011. Excuse me, and it was only visited twice by Chinese astronauts. In 2016, the Chinese Space Agency announced it was no longer tracking the 12-meter by 3.3-meter, 8-ton station.
What do you mean they're no longer tracking it? They
well, it was still being
there.
tracked, in fact, in North Bay, Canadian scientists and engineers, etc., at NORAD continue to track all of this space debris. There's a whole lot going out there. We're going to be hearing more about it, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. Will we see it? Will shards land? What's going to happen?
As long as it doesn't land on our heads.
No. It's apparently one person...
Well, he said there's no guarantees.
No.
They're looking very far, but there's no guarantee.
One person somewhere in the States was hit by a small shard at some point, and then there was a big piece of another Skylab actually fell in the desert, I think, somewhere. But interesting. Okay, let's get to our blogs this week. And the one that sticks in my mind, of course, was the sad news that the Pope was not going to apologize to Canada's Indigenous peoples for what they suffered, particularly in what were known as residential schools, where children as young as 4 and 5 were taken by law from their families and put in boarding schools, mostly, where many were severely abused, and an estimated 6,000 children died. A very, very tragic part of our history.
But why did he not? Why is that? Because he could be sued or what?
Nobody's answered straight out, but apparently he said he couldn't personally respond at this point. But people are going to continue with the invitation to the Pope, and hopefully it will come to pass. But it's certainly food for thought over the Easter weekend across Canada. And another blog, of course, Celine Dion's 50th birthday. Friday. That remarkable life continues. 3 shows in Vegas at the end of May, and then a tour of Asia and Australia beginning at the end of June.
Calm down, Celine.
She is something.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she is. Okay, so Terry, let's talk baseball. The boys of summer are back.
All right. Come on, pitch hard. Here we go. A little batter here, no batter here.
And what was that headline today about the Blue Jays bombing?
They bombed.
My goodness,
It was the worst opening night I've ever seen in my 70 years of watching baseball.
Why?
They stunk. And anyway, don't get me started. I'm not on a talk show anymore.
What happened to Vladimir Guerrero, who was so sensational in Montreal?
He's in the minors.
Oh.
He's in the minors right now. They sent him back to the minors, to the Vladdy Jr., little Vladdy, who won.
When can he come up?
Well, you see, with contracts being what they are, you get to when you sign somebody, you get them for 6 years in the majors. But if you send them to the minors for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then you get them for 7 years. They've got to be here for 187 days. So that's when will he be up? We still don't know if he can hit Double-A pitching. I'm not even sure if he went to Buffalo or
certainly looked great in Montreal.
Yeah, but I mean he was on a high, right? I mean
26,000 fans on their feet.
He's the number 3 prospect in all of organized baseball.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of time.
So they say, but you never know. I was reading a story about a guy I'll tell you a story. Darren Fletcher, who was a dear friend of mine who caught for the Expos and the Blue Jays for a number of years. His junior year in college, in university, he hit .497. .497. He had 161 at-bats, 80 hits. I mean, doing well is 300. It's 3 out of 10. He almost hit 500. This isn't a fast league. This isn't Big Ten baseball. Good baseball. He made it to the majors. He was a good catcher. He was a good ball player, but he never came close to hitting anything like that. He was like a 270, I would bet. I didn't look it up. Hitter. It's amazing how much tougher it gets the higher up you go. I mean, pitchers don't mess around in the major leagues.
Well, that game the other night is not good news for Toronto and the team, because apparently already the sales are really, really way down. Season's tickets are down, what, 7,000?
They're down from 20,000 to 13,000. They keep poor-mouthing themselves. They got the biggest market outside of Chicago and Los Angeles and New York of anywhere in North America. But we're a small market team. Don't get me started.
So they have that small market thinking.
That's what I think. That's what I think. They're, but it's also a Canadian thing. Canadians don't take risks. For instance, in 1994.
Hey, wait a second. Seriously. Look at the Toronto Maple Leafs in hockey. Look what's going on there.
Yeah, they finished last a couple of times, and they got some good draft choices.
Well,
okay, that's not taking a risk. Taking a risk would have been for Claude Brochu, who owned the Montreal Expos, after the 1994 season was shut down when we were like a million miles ahead of anybody else.
Yes.
All his stars came to him and said, we'll work at half of market value, less than market value, to keep this team together. He did not meet them halfway. This is and those guys cried. Grissom, Walker, Wetland, Kenny Hill. They all had to leave because now I see again.
Such a sad chapter in Montreal history.
But I'm saying it's just that Canadians we don't have the wherewithal. We don't have the craziness that Americans have when it comes to investing.
Well, look what happened with the Avro Arrow. I mean,
that's
what are
right.
we supposed
What happened to the Avro Arrow? All it winds up is a Dan Aykroyd movie.
Zubir, what do you think?
I share his opinion, but the thing is, it's easy to say, but when it comes to money, all the time,
it's not our money.
That's the risk assessment, and for those, you have to count it twice,
Risk assessment. The Expos would have filled the place. They would have won pennant after pennant after pennant. They would have built a new ballpark.
Okay, apparently there's still talk. They could come back. A team can come back, but they have to have a new stadium. That is one of the conditions.
That's only $500 million. Here, let me write a check.
We'll see. And that basically brings us to the end of this link. Thank you all for joining us.
I thought we were going to do a talk show, a sports talk show.
Well, we did.
We sort of did.
Yes, we did. And hopefully we'll have more good news with the Blue Jays.
I don't think so. It's going to be a long year.
Thank you all for joining us, whatever way you're there. Until next week, I'm Carmel Kilkenny, sitting in here for Mark Montgomery. And thank you to everyone who contributed today, of course. Lynn Desjardins, Terry Haig, Mark Montgomery, Leo Jimeno, Zubir Jazzy, and Sylvain Brunet. Nice to be with you again. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye. Bye.